entering the Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience. Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, the Players Championship DraftKings picks and preview. A lot of big contests on DraftKings this week, so if you want to win some, don't listen to me. This has been the biggest taker tournament that I've had every single year for the past 3 years. It's been abysmal. So my new strategy is just take the players I don't like that are super low owned and then go like this at my rosters, and hey, maybe I'll win something. So fortunately, I actually have brought in two smart people to help convince me and sway me certain ways. But before we get to that, I want to let everyone know to give the episode a like. I have a live players chat or live players chat coming 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the DraftKings YouTube channel on Wednesday, so be there. Fill up the screen, and I'll get to all your answers. Reed Fowler will be joining me for that. And Fantasy National, last week, monthly or weekly memberships, are $7 going up to $10 next week. But if you get in on the weekly rate now, you'll be locked in to $7 per week as long as you decide to keep that on a continuous basis. So some of you want to do, and there's like new peak dye filters, a new mixed condition model. It's a lot of new tools you can use to help you go up the standings at fantasynational.com. So go check that out. Also, sub to the pod. You don't need to listen, just download it. It'll all work itself out. Anyway, Mike Leone, Ben Rasa joining me. This isn't quite a major, fellas, but I had to get the major team together because I need major help this week. So, Leone, tell everyone where you're coming from and what you guys are offering this week.
I'm coming from dailyroto.com. We've got projections this week. We've got ownership projections, an optimizer. We'll have a podcast that you can check out, Going for the Green, on the Fantasy Sports Network. So we've got a lot going on. Our projections are powered by Data Golf, two very, very smart Canadian data scientists. So
is one of them Pat Mayo?
Really,
I'm a Canadian scientist.
A data scientist?
Sure.
So yeah, we've got a ton going on. I'm really excited about it. We've got a finished probability model and a fantasy model. You can kind of converge those two. I like having to look at both of those each week. We've got strokes gain trends tools. We've got course history, strokes gain tools. So we got a lot going on, and hopefully it will help you win some money.
Raza, you're over at FanVice. What do you guys got on the go here besides your awesome Slack chat?
Yeah, Slack, obviously always fun. Got articles, got projections run by Andrew Barron, who's on actually a really good heater right now. Then there'll be, we got the pod with me, Hot Magic, and Tim Frank this afternoon. Then we have a Wednesday show where we kind of break down ownership, kind of lineup construction, things like that. So yeah, it's obviously a really fun week for the golf world.
Yeah, do you feel like people jump into this tournament a little bit more in terms of DraftKings only because there's been like a lull between the Masters and the US Open, and this is like the one tournament it's going to happen? We've seen the bigger prize pools. Obviously, all top 50 players in the world are there. Would you expect this to be more of a public week than normal, Ben?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you talked about the prizes are up, gets a lot of hype. It's the fifth major. That's what they call it. And it isn't a lull. I think everyone after the Masters, you had a couple weeks off, and now it's time to get back into it.
All right, well, let's get into it because there is a name that I want to talk about off the hop. He's a very contentious player on the Pat Mayo Experience, at least Golf Majors podcast, or Fifth Majors podcast. I do not subscribe to anything being a fifth major because there's only 4 majors. It makes no sense. But Francesco Molinari is up in price, great course history. He's coming in playing pretty decent golf, and he's Mike Leone's favorite golfer of all time. But he's setting up to be kind of chalky this week for the Players Championship. So, Mike, I got to ask you, what are you going to do with Francesco Molinari? Are you going to eat the chalk?
First of all, playing pretty decent golf. He was first in tee to green last week. You're always just bashing on Molinari. He had a shoulder injury, which we found out about. Now he's close to 100%. He's moving up strokes gained approach. So I think you owe Francesco an apology.
Well, how about this? Will you try to convince me that I should play Francesco Molinari? I'm going to have this bubble paper, and I'm just going to pop bubbles because that's more fun than this.
I'm not, I'm here the major Francesco Molinari propagandist, so you don't need to hear me.
I like this
I refuse. I'm throwing it to Ben. I refuse this bubble popping. This is
What do you mean? You're dressed for the Molinari talk. I put on a collar shirt and I get outdone.
Here's the ironic thing is I actually don't think he's that good of a play this week at 8,100 because you've got really loose pricing and such a deep field that there's a bunch of guys in the high 8s, low 9s that I really like. There's a lot of guys at that $7,400 range that I like, and he gets lost in the shuffle a bit. So if he's going to be chalky, I actually think it's a good fade. You know, it feels dirty to say that, but I do think he's a pretty good fade this week.
Yeah, Ben, I would. This is one of the few spots I would have some interest in Molinari, but if everyone's going to use him, I don't really want him whatsoever. Are you going to play Francesco Molinari?
I might have some exposure, but there's no way that I'm going to be able to get over the field if he comes in at the ownership that I think he's going to. Definitely a guy I might look to in cash. The results speak for themselves. Recent form is good. The course history is good, but I'm not going to be leveraging 35% Molinari in tournaments, and that's possibly what you need to get a good spot.
Do you think that there is a possibility that we're all talking about, hey, Francesco is going to be chalk, and then by the time the tournament actually starts, that everyone has talked themselves out of Molinari and he comes in way lower than we think?
Yeah, I think there's a chance that happens. Just because the pricing that I gave, I think people are going to be seeing the exact same thing where they see when they actually go, like they might like Francesco Molinari in a vacuum as an individual play, but then when they go to make teams and they can make these teams with a lot of these studs for a few $100 more, and then to balance that out, they need to go a little bit cheaper than 8,100. I could see that happening. I don't think he's going to be low owned by any means, but maybe he's in the low double digits instead of the high double digits, which is a meaningful difference.
All right, let's talk about the course a little bit. TPC Sawgrass. Anyone who watches golf is pretty familiar, as it's one of the highest rated and made for TV events that there is during the course of the year. They're expanding coverage this year. I think online 2,200 hours of live coverage when you combine it all together. I mean, I can get behind that live stream of 17 at all times. So you might actually be able to watch the golfers that you take on your team this time. So that's always nice. It's a Pete Dye course, which we know comes with a lot of, there's wonkiness to them. They're a lot shorter than most normal courses. The greens are really tiny, and it will test almost your entire game. Bombers have no real significant advantage here, but it seems like ball strikers really do. But you do, where the greens are so tiny, you do need to have a modicum of a short game to save yourself some par. But this is also a strategy course, like all Pete Dye courses, knowing where to miss. And that doesn't even just come from experience, just looking at the course, be like, oh, if I put it short, I can make an easy par. If I put it long, I bring both water or into the rough and double bogey into play. So I think that the smarter players, which there's no real metric on, but it's one of those feel things, are going to end up having a pretty good week here. And those with short games will be able to save themselves a lot of disaster, because you're going to see outrageous numbers here. 25 water hazards, sand everywhere. There's trees and there's woods. It's not going to be good for a lot of people. Like when you look at John Rahm last year, who was just cruising through the first two rounds, then he shot over 80 in the third round, and then he got MDF. So, Ben, in terms of stats, I'm focusing on tee to green with an emphasis on ball striking, a little dash of around the green, but I think the par 4 scoring is really where it comes in here.
I agree. I'm pretty similar. You got to find a way to keep the irons in check. If you're in the water, the course is gettable if you avoid the hazards. That's easier said than done, but it's not overpowering. It's not overwhelming. It's just if you make mistakes, one hole can just derail the whole thing. So good with the irons. Sand saves around the green, I think, are important. You don't want your guys dealing with that, too often, because that means they're not hitting the green. They're not giving them chances to score. But you're going to have to grind, bogey avoidance, even though it doesn't correlate to DraftKings scoring. To be able to hold it together is another thing I'll take a look at.
Yeah, Mike, Ben brings up an interesting point as it pertains to bogey avoidance. And normally we're looking for DK scores. Oh, birdie or better percentage. Boom, boom, boom. Do you think this could be one of these weeks where placement points actually mean a lot?
Yeah, it could be whenever you're seeing the scoring environment, not as easy as you do in other tournaments. It's just a simple weighting of the amount of expected scoring points versus finish points. They carry a bit more weight. So, and made cut probabilities, stuff like that matters a bit more. But in general, what it makes me think of is just accepting the variance of the situation. I know a lot of the top, 40 golfers in the field last year missed the cut. We saw a lot of carnage last year. Pat, you mentioned all of the water on the course, the sand, and it just could be a high variance type of event. So I wouldn't be afraid to make some necessary pivots. In tournaments, I always think like the variants of golf that you should be aware of that and take some lower owned pivots, even if you feel like the guy's not quite as strong of a play. But this week in particular, I think that makes sense. And if you're doing something like a 3 max, I could see, not having a tight core of players, maybe even spreading out and having very few overlapped players across your 3 teams in an event like that. And Data Golf does do a cool visual of displaying where the strokes are gained at this event historically relative to the tour average. And the thing that they've seen there is strokes gained off the tee and around the green are right in line with the tour average, but we see a heavier emphasis on strokes gained approach, and that draws from strokes gained putting, which seems to have skewed a bit lighter historically here.
Well, the one thing about the off the tee work, you can gain similar strokes off the tee, but I think you're going to gain your strokes in a different way off the tee, especially as like just juxtapose it to Wells Fargo last week, where you're just bombing it off every single tee box because the course is so long. Now we're dealing with a Pete Dye course that's under 7,200 yards. And even when you look back at last season and some of the guys that went up to the very top, like your Si Woos and your Kyle Stanleys, like these aren't the biggest bombers in the world. Now, some of the bombers did really well. JB Holmes was cruising through 3.5 rounds, and then he got addicted to the water. The guy got dehydrated and just needed to go take a dip, and then he got completely ejected. Adam Scott always plays well here because when you take driver out of his hands and he can club down a little bit, and we've even seen that at Valspar and Honda this year with a lot of these big bombers. Some guys just play better the moment that you take the driver out of their hand, and that's the club that we associate them best with because they drive it so far, but they really improve their accuracy and get themselves to better spots on some of these shorter courses. So I think it's interesting to look at from that perspective. Let's go to the top of the board to figure out who we actually need to take here. Rory is the most expensive player. He is 11-6 on DraftKings. He has the most strokes gained total of any player in this field over the past 5 years at this course. He's followed by Day at 11-4, Spieth at 11-1. Those are above 11,000. Then you have Justin Thomas at 10-8 and Dustin Johnson at 10-3. Dustin Johnson has never finished better than 12th in this tournament. However, that did come last year after there was a redesign at the course and everything got a little bit tougher. So, Raza, what do I do from this top end? Because my initial lean very early on is I want to take Justin Thomas. And I am going to take Justin Thomas. I think he's going to be kind of chalky because I think he's going to be a lot of people's favorite from this range. But after that, I think that I need to go somewhat contrarian, and I think that guy's going to be Jordan Spieth.
Here we go. Yeah, the unknown, horrible course history. I don't know, hasn't been playing. He's the wild card. So for tournaments, I have no problem going Spieth. I don't think the ownership will be overwhelming. The guy that, and I didn't think I would be on DJ, but I found myself looking to the discount. I do like that he played Heritage. I do like that he was, best finish he's ever had last year here. And that savings, you can really bolster the bottom of your lineup. So I think in a macro approach, I'm going more balanced this week. There's no problem with any of these guys. He's the best players in the world, but I actually am looking to DJ at a price that we're not normally accustomed to seeing him hover around 10K. He's usually the Rory price where he's about 12K.
Yeah, I think a lot of this will get shaken out as the week goes along in terms of ownership because the information that we have on Wednesday is going to be better than the information that we have on Tuesday. Leone, do you think this is one of these situations where you look at the top 5 guys, they're all very good. Well, let's just qualify that just to begin with, but do you just gravitate towards the guy who no one else is owning?
I think I'm not going to say yes. I'm tempted to say yes because I just said about that whole spiel about embracing variance and whatnot, but I think I'm going to do that when we get below the 10K range because I think up here ownership might end up pretty spread out evenly between these guys. And I'm with Ben. When you consider that, I'd rather grab DJ with a discount who's arguably the best player in the world. We have his adjusted strokes gained over the last 2 years as him the best player in the entire field. You mentioned he finished 12th here last year. He was one of the better players in strokes gained off the tee last year here. So I like DJ a lot. I have this gut feel that I like Spieth, but our initial ownership projections actually have him as one of the chalkier guys in this group. But again, it's very early in the week. And in general, we have all these guys in like the 15 to 20% range. So I don't know if you're picking up a whole ton of leverage unless at the end of the week, everyone ends up just dropping down in price to DJ, in which case I will look to pivot. But early on, it doesn't look like that will happen.
Well, to kind of piggyback on what Rasa said earlier about the course history versus form debate, not that Spieth's in the greatest form ever. He did have a very good showing at the Masters. Missed the cut at the team event with Ryan Palmer. And you don't want Ryan Palmer at a course where there's too much water because you'll end up in the middle of it. But with Jordan Spieth, like, he has 3 consecutive missed cuts at this tournament. But in his debut year, he was second. Like, is there any way to wrap your mind around that, Mike?
So one of the interesting things, and Colin Drew pointed this out to me, the course history on a lot of these guys is extremely variant. And I think that goes back to the way the course is with all the water and whatnot. You really don't get a lot of elite course history from guys, which is interesting given that for a non-major, we've seen the top players with a pretty large sample size here. So I think that's what happens. I mean, even Molinari, who you said has really good course history, I think over the last 6, he's got 3 top 10s, but he's also got 3 missed cuts. So you're looking at a lot of variance. Sergio Garcia is really the only guy that seems to have this crazy league course history here. We saw it, last year he was good strokes gained tee to green, and we just seen it sort of year in and year out with him. So I think that explains why I wouldn't try too hard to figure out why Spieth was awesome in his debut and then missed 3 straight cuts. I think it's a variable course, and that's going to happen to a lot of these guys, even the really good golfers.
Now, even because the pricing is so soft, it still seems like people might shy away from Rory at the very top. There's this weird, like, the guys that play DraftKings every single week and have a huge bankroll, they all love Rory because of the birdie or better that he brings and the upside that he presents. But the price might get a little bit too high for people, and I think that Dustin will end up being much higher owned than he will because people will take that discount. But even if you take Rory, you can still have a top guy and build a pretty respectable team, because there are guys in the bottom $7,000 area to even the high $6,000 area that aren't scrubs because this field is so deep. So is Rory potentially the pivot guy of all the top 5?
I mean, you don't have to work hard to convince me to play some Rory. It's one of those situations, though, the top always garners ownership. You're not going to get any of these guys at a reduced where it's a clear pivot like you might in the mid-range. So I have no problem with that. There's plenty of value down there. But if it's somewhat mitigated, I do think that 1,300 will come in handy, and you can really build a nice lineup where you don't have to dip into the 6s if you don't want to.
All right, so Justin Thomas is my favorite play of these top 5 guys. Mike, who's your single favorite play?
DJ.
Or Ben?
Yeah, DJ for me too.
All right. Let's drop to the $9,000 area, and it's led off by Rickie Fowler, everyone's favorite guy. Except for last week when he finds the water a lot too. And this might not be the best layout, even though he's won here before. And even to talk about former winners here, Rickie won, but he had missed the cut the year before. Then Jason Day won the next year, and he had missed the cut the year before. We're not even talking about Jason Day coming off a win, by the way, which is kind of funny. Rickie Fowler, 96. John Rahm, 93. Justin Rose, 91. Sergio, $9,000. I love Rahm in this spot. If you look at the way that he scores on some of these shorter par 4s, he kind of kills it all the time. He hasn't played all that much, but the last time we saw him was at the Masters, which is a non-weighted event, so that might skew some of the stats, and he played really well there. He has a win at a partial Pete Dye track earlier this year, Career Builder. I just like him a lot, and like I had mentioned, through 2 rounds in his debut appearance, he had played really well here. And it's funny, because I look on Fantasy National right now, and if I don't like to give away too much because members would get mad at me, but if you look at the tournament simulator, John Rahm is number 1 in the simulator, and he's number 1 by a lot in terms of overall winning percentage this week. Now, is that just because he scores on these holes in a certain range, that he doesn't have enough history, that we really can't dock him for bad performances on courses like this that can be highly variant? I don't know. But for me, in this $9,000 range, it's him, then it's Sergio, and I don't know if I'm going to use any Rickie whatsoever. What do you think, Mike?
I'm with you on John Rahm. We have him as the top 5 golfer in this field, just from overall skill level. So when you combine that macro view of his skill level with the micro things that you mentioned, where you think he fits the certain holes correctly, I think this is the play. Also, a guy that if you do get a made cut, last year, with the exception with that crazy, terrible round and getting the MDF, but you're generally getting a ton of DraftKings points. He's the quote unquote DK score. So I'm heavy on Rahm. I'm not as high on Sergio. I just think his overall game, the last 6 months to a year has been somewhat disappointing. And even with him being the one guy with an elite course history, I just feel like the other guys around him right now, I think he's more of a mid to low 8Ks player, quite frankly, and he's priced at 9K with guys that are better. And I don't see an ownership discount because the elite course history, people like to look at it, you know, whether or not you believe in it, people use it. And for him to be the guy that really stands out there, he's going to carry some ownership no matter what.
Well, the early projections that I'm looking at, and Ben, get you in on this as well, Sergio is by far the lowest owned right now, projection-wise, of the four guys in the $9,000 range. I have him around like 10%.
That's interesting. I honestly would have thought that Rahm wasn't going to be as highly owned as it looks like he might be. I know you guys both mentioned you like him. I worry about his approaches, to be honest. I mean, his best club is clearly the driver. It will be mitigated here. You could say the same thing about Dustin Johnson, no doubt. But I do worry about Rahm. I don't think this is the best fit. I was stunned. I remember last year, Thursday and Friday, when he was rolling, to see it. I did not think he would handle the course, especially that was his first time here. As the experience, for me, it's Justin Rose. Good with the irons, was good at Valspar, good at API, fine at the Masters, hasn't been doing much. He's another one. The course history, you know, Mike said it well. You're not going to find guys that just have 5 straight, you know, T15. You're going to have a couple missed cuts. You're going to have maybe a top 5. It's going to be all over the map. So Rose is the guy I want to target, and I don't think he will be too popular.
So it seems like the three of us are all off Ricky.
Yeah, I think I'm off Ricky. He's the priciest of the bunch. I don't think you're getting an ownership discount. To piggyback on what Ben said too, you know, as much as I do like Rahm, there does seem to be this narrative sometimes of these tougher courses that he can unravel a bit, you know, as that sort of hothead moniker associated with him. I don't know how true that is, but it does feel like it's played out a couple of times, including that third round last year. So I'm still going to play him. I like him a lot, but my second favorite in this tier is going to be Rose. So I'm with Ben on that one. And, you know, off Ricky, off Sergio.
Well, if you're going to play Justin Rose, as the correlation generally happens, that means you have to play HENRIK Stenson, too, who's in this $8,000 area, projected to be right now, at least by my model, that he will be the highest owned player of the week. He's won this tournament before. When we think about accuracy and irons, and we think of ball striking, we think of HENRIK Stenson. But it's Casey at 8-9, Stenson at 8-8. And then we have Patrick Reed, the Masters champion, at 8-7, who probably no one's going to play because people seem to just hate Patrick Reed. Tiger at 8-6, Hideki at 8-5, Phil, Bryson, Fleetwood, Molinari at 8-1, and then Kisner at $8,000. I mentioned this on my Monday show with Feinberg. I've been seeing a lot of the buzz around, and now like the anti-backlash has come, but I don't care how highly owned Tiger is. I'm using Tiger this week. I have not used him in a single DraftKings lineup so far this season, but this just, with the way that he's been playing this year and the courses that have really fit him, this seems like it lines up perfectly. If he's ever going to break through, this is the spot.
Yeah, I finally used him last week. I was excited to finally get him in the lineup after fading him week in and week out, and it felt good. And I do think it's sort of ironic that in my eyes, as he's continued to play and put up, you know, decent performances, if not elite performances, my confidence level in his current skill and where he's at health-wise and everything has actually increased, whereas it seemed like the field has jumped off of him a little bit because he hasn't had these top performances, which is this weird juxtaposition in how your perspective is where it started and where it is now. And he's going to be somewhat chalky, as you said at the top of the show. You embed, like, this could be a week that the public is playing on DraftKings a bit more just because of the allure of the event and sort of a dry spell prior to this and after this. And I still like Tiger. And it's one of those things, you know, maybe we think he comes in at 20%. Another guy in this range comes in at 15%. But whenever you're doing projected ownerships, there's a margin of error of, you know, generally like 3 to 5 percentage points. And you're going to get a few guys that are way off. So if you really like a player, you can still use him even if he's going to be somewhat chalky. And the thing too is, from a micro perspective, each player you can find a pivot where it's like, okay, this guy makes more sense in tournaments. But if you do that 1 through 6 with your lineup, and we hit on this when we did the Masters show together too, you might end up just playing a bad lineup if you start pivoting here, pivoting there. And individually, each pivot might make sense, but you do still have to think about your team collectively.
In this $8,000 range, we'll talk about from Tiger up, Ben, is he your favorite play? Is Stenson your favorite play? Is this just another week where Paul Casey gets no love and we look on Sunday, it's like, oh, he's T6 all of a sudden?
Paul Casey's definitely a guy I'm going to use probably in cash and then in tournaments because, when you don't have to lean on the placement points, it makes it so much easier. He's one of the most reliable guys in the field. But just to echo, Mike literally just said I hadn't used Tiger the entire year. I used him last week. And even though it did not work out, I was very encouraged because he was great. He just could not putt at all. I'm hoping that will suppress the ownership. If people just look at the game log, they say, oh, he wasn't good again. He was actually showed big improvements off the team with the irons. He was great. He just could not make anything. I think that returns, and I am encouraged. I am using Tiger again this week, and I'm hoping it won't be overly owned. Yeah, he may get a bump if there are casuals playing, but it's not going to be anything where he's 35-40%, which a couple, when he was rolling earlier in the year, we saw some crazy ownership with him.
One of the things that I convinced myself, and I mentioned this off the top, that if there is chalk that I'm not 100% sold on, or even if I'm wishy-washy, or I like other people in that area, that I'm just not going to eat it, and I'm going to go the other way. Because like both of you guys have mentioned, this is a tournament that has a lot of variance, so maybe hoping that one of these guys explodes and I don't have any might be the move. I think that Ricky falls into that camp for me, and I think that Stenson's going to fall into that camp for me too. I know he's playing well. I know he has good course history, but I don't think that he's substantially better than Paul Casey right now. Like, if I can get Patrick Reed at a fourth the ownership, which is probably going to happen, like, why would I just do that instead?
Yeah, I'm extremely conflicted on Stenson, someone that has been good to me and horrible to me at different times in my PGA DFS history, and I'm pretty sure everyone's had a similar experience. And you look at his recent strokes gained trends, which we have on Daily Roto, he's been awesome strokes gained approach the last couple of events and its last few events, and it's hard to overlook that with the course history and a good price. But as you said, Pat, if it's someone you're not completely sold on, that looks like they're going to be really chalky, and that describes Stenson for me perfectly. I think that our initial ownership projections have him and Tiger as the top two owned. As I said, I'm going to play Tiger, even though I expect him to be chalky, but Stenson's where I might pivot. And I mean, let's be honest, I play Paul Casey every single week that he is in a tournament. One of the biggest Paul Casey fans. Data Golf has this 40-round rolling strokes gained trend thing that you can look at, and I've said this often, but it's been true for a month or so now that his 40-round rolling is better than Jordan Spieth's. I think he's one of the more underrated golfers. There's this allure around him that he can't win, even though he did win this year. So I'm firmly on Paul Casey. He's going to be on one of my primary GPP teams this week.
Yeah, one of the things that I like to do is I'll sort by like last 24 rounds overall, and I'll set the date range like the last 3 months, so I'm not getting rounds from like 2 years ago from guys that rarely end up playing on tour. So I look at it right now, past 24 rounds, strokes gained tee to green. And I actually have on Fantasy National, I've set it up, although it's not weighted, I do have approach off the tee and around the green sitting next to it, just to see if there's any like red flags, like, ooh, this guy kills it off the tee and approach, but he sucks around the green, that kind of thing. The top guys right now, in order: Luke List, Spieth, JT, DJ, Adam Hadwin, Sergio, Bryson, Ryan Moore, Molinari, Scott Piercy. That's the top 10. Then you got Rahm, Griot, Bradley, Benny Ann, and then Paul Casey. So I think it's kind of interesting, and Paul Casey's one of the few that just across the board, pretty good. The only thing that he kind of lacks is around the green, but he hits so many goddamn greens in regulation, he doesn't really use the short game all that much. So I might be with you that if Casey's going to come in lower owned than the rest, that I'll just take, instead of going to Reed and pivoting that way off Stenson, I'll pivot up $100 and just use Paul Casey instead. Or I'll just go down, and I don't know what to do with Hideki, but I'm pretty sure no one's going to own him.
Yeah, sorry, Ben, you want
to I don't know what to do with him either, so I'll pass it to you. It's a tough one.
Hideki is one of those guys that I seem to always be on when he's lower priced. I'm going to play him. He's only had 16 rounds here, but the one way that Data Golf looks at course history is they look at the adjusted strokes gained. So they try to smooth out some of that variance where you've got, top 5 finishes and missed cuts. Hideki's is actually pretty stable. I think he's 4 top 25s in a row here, but of all the golfers in the field, they actually have him as the best course history here in his 16 rounds when you look at it from adjusted strokes gained per round standpoint. So I found that very interesting. And I think that's a if you like course history, I think that's a sneaky way to get a guy that has good course history that people might not recognize.
I guess the big thing and the part that I'm struggling with, if he would just come in playing like regular Hideki, it'd be really nice, but he dealt with that wrist injury. He hasn't been all that good since. He's been fine. The around the green game has been top notch and one of the best in the field, but when I think of Hideki, I think ball striking. That's what he does well, and that has just eluded him over the past 2 months.
Yeah, I just say if he was coming in playing like regular Hideki, he'd be massive chalk at this price tag. So there's some push and pull there.
So I think that I'll probably burn a few lineups on him because Bryson's right there too. Bryson's expected to be pretty chalky. I don't love his around the green game, but as Feinberg mentioned, if it's a course that can be played in any sort of simulator, Bryson can play well at that course. What do you do between the two, Ben? Are you going to use more Hideki, more Bryson, any, all of it? Like, what's your take right there?
I don't love this range, to be honest. I mean, Phil is there too. He's another one.
I cannot do Phil with this course. I know he's won here before, but he just, if you told me that one of these players from like the top 50 in the world are going to shoot a 90, it's going to be Phil.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, he just, Mike touched upon it with Rom a little, where like there are just spots where you have to take your medicine, and the number one guy in the field to not do that is Phil. He always thinks he can pull off miraculous shots. He does sometimes, but he could just blow up in one hole. Hideki is interesting in the sense that he's got one of the biggest, if you look at recent form and course history, it's one of the biggest discrepancies right now. He's not playing well, but man, he's played well here consistently. I'm just worried the approaches have just not been there lately. I know it's somewhat of a small sample size coming back from the wrist, so I don't think you'll need too much to get overweight. I may sprinkle and see where I land. Not going to be a big stand for any of these guys. Kind of the same theory for me with Bryson. I'll take some if I come in slightly underweight or slightly overweight, so be it.
The other guy here is last week's chalk of the week and missed the cut, Tommy Fleetwood. And we talked about Luke List a little bit on last week's show when I was talking to Rick, saying like, hey, he was the chalk and he missed the cut. Now, are people going to go back to him? And people went back to Luke List. I don't feel like the same thing is going to happen to Fleetwood here. You might get him at like middle, like 5% owned, potentially, with all the other names around him that are just playing better. He did make the cut, although it was a T41 in his debut appearance here last year, but he almost fits this perfect type of mold of the players that we see at the top of the leaderboard here. Like, they drive the ball well, they're hot with irons, they're really good around the green, and they can't putt. I mean, that's Tommy Fleetwood in a nutshell.
I feel like I started playing a couple of the Euro guys, Fleetwood and Noren specifically, at the exact wrong time. I ate the Fleetwood chalk last week, and it was really disappointing. But I'm going back to the well this week. We have him coming in single-digit ownerships, closer to 5 than to 10. Of course, very early on in the week. But given that over the last 6 months, his adjusted strokes gained is top 10 in this entire field, which has all of the best players in it, so borderline top 10 in the entire world. I don't see any way you don't go back to him this week. So I'm in on Fleetwood. I think in general, I like this low 8s to mid 8s range a bit more than both of you guys. I can see building some pretty crazy balanced teams here, even taking some shots on Phil, even though I will probably end up hating myself for it.
I'll probably go the other way, and yeah, I think that the pivots in this range are somewhat interesting. If you want to take some more of the chalkier $7,000 guys, and there's like 4 or 5 of them that kind of really stick out that everyone's gravitating towards, Ben, Fleetwood and Kisner seem to be the two guys just people do not want in this low $8,000 area.
And those are two guys that I'm definitely going to have exposure to. Part of the reason you guys touched upon it earlier, if you really like a chalky play, it doesn't mean, oh, don't play him. You just need to find a way to differentiate, and that's got to be with your 5 other guys. So, there's going to be spots. We'll obviously talk about, Grillo and some of these other really popular plays. Fleetwood, Kisner, those are ways to separate yourself from all the other people that are going to own the chalk. And if it hits, you need a way to have that leverage. So Fleetwood right next to Molinari is a guy. I wasn't on him last week, but I like the spot this week, no doubt.
Yeah, and I'm going to go to Kisner. I mean, every time we get to a Pete Dye course, everyone just makes reasons for why they don't want to use Kevin Kisner. And every time he plays a Pete Dye course, he plays really well. Like, his game is specifically tailored to this course. And I joked with Feinberg yesterday that Kevin Kisner's basically the new Matt Kuchar. He's slightly younger Matt Kuchar. He puts the ball in the fairway every single time. He's good with his irons. He's good around the greens, and he putts well. He doesn't do one thing exceptionally well, but he's specifically tailored to this type of course where distance doesn't matter.
So why not just use Kuchar?
Why don't I use them both? Because Kuchar's going to be like 20% owned.
You think so?
Yeah.
I think he always ends up.
When was the last time Matt Kuchar went into an event where he had good course history and people weren't like, I'll take Matt Kuchar? Because he's always underpriced.
Yeah, he's difficult because you never think of him as a high upside guy, even though I think that's wrong. But he does seem perpetually underpriced, and he's got that safe tag applied to him where people are like, yep, I'll just take him below the average cost of a roster spot. So I do think our model probably will have him a bit chalkier as the week moves on. Are you going back to Noren? I'm going back to Fleetwood. What about Noren? I've used Noren a couple times. I used him at the Masters. It was atrocious. I used him last week. It was atrocious. I don't know how much more I can handle, but I'll probably subject myself to a bit more torture. Well,
when we drop in this entire upper part of the $7,000 range, it starts with Bubba, then goes to Noren, then goes to Kuchar. Then you got Poulter, Brooks, Leishman, Louis, Cam Smith, Berger, Horschel, before you get to like the chalkier guys at 7,500. Noren's one of those guys that I'm playing, and I have no specific reason to why, other than long-term skill of the player. And he did have a top 10 here last year, but he specifically fits the type of player that I would look at his numbers. They're not great recently, and I would say, you know what? He's in bad form. I'm not playing that guy. And then when I look up the leaderboard on Sunday at this stupid event, that he's going to be in like 4th place. So I know that sounds really bizarre to think about that way, but I'll embrace the variance of Alex Noren's game. He's a really good player. He's underpriced. He's better than everyone else in this range from an upside perspective. I think probably outside of Brooks is the only other one in there. Like Kuchar's safe. He has upside, but Noren, over the past year and a half has been a much better player. He's just going through a bit of a funk right now that I think that he's someone that I do want to take, and he's played really well in Florida. I think that's the one thing that people forget, that we're going back to Florida now. We had our Florida swing, then we left Florida for like 6 weeks. Now we're back. Some guys just play better in Florida. You can just go look at the bulk of Florida events, and there's certain guys that just, I like the weather here better. It gets a bit windy. Oh, you know who plays well in the wind? Alex Noren. So I'm going to use Alex Noren. Are you guys going to do it, though?
I'm going to have some. I'm with you. He's been really disappointing for me. I used him last week heavily, and he was just bad. And I thought coming off the Masters disappointment, it was a nice rebound spot. And it wasn't, but, I don't mind buying in kind of in a cluster and say, I'm not going to let a couple miscuts derail me. You're going to get really nice ownership. And I agree. If you take a long-term view, he's maybe the most talented guy in this little range. So definitely use him over someone like Ian Poulter, who I'm sure will get some ownership based on last year and how he sets up. But I would take Noren every time in that spot.
Well, Ian Poulter's an interesting case because he has good course history. He's playing probably the best he's ever played right now. And he has the T2 from last year. And he crushes Pete Dye courses. Like, he and Kuchar are very similar players. Mike, where do your eyes lean in the top of this range?
I'm not really on Poulter. He was actually my final round pick in our Daily Roto internal seasonal league. So anything he does is just a bonus for me there, and I'll take it. But DFS, not on him. I don't think we talked about Bubba, which is interesting.
Pass.
Another guy.
Pass.
Nope, pass.
Wait, get the bubbles out again.
I was gonna say, yeah.
I just find it.
Do you think?
I don't think I'm on him.
How many times, like Phil? How many times can Bubba play a shot from the middle of a lake?
No, I'm not saying I'm on him. I just find it really interesting that this is someone that, a month ago, mega chalk week in, week out. Now he's 7,900 and probably going to be pretty low owned. I find that dynamic interesting, even though I agree that you look at sort of the longer term form and also the course fit, it's not ideal.
Well, it's really funny with Bubba because he's won at Pete Dye's match play in Austin. He's won at the Travelers, a Pete Dye course, and he's won at TPC Louisiana, a Pete Dye course. He has a really good Pete Dye track record, and he only wins at very specific courses. And this is a Pete Dye track he's just been brutal at over the years. Like, he's been abysmally bad for 10 years now at this tournament. I don't know. I think it's because he has no short game.
Yeah, I mean, it's not – I was just going to say, it seems like one of those things, and Bubba's the type of guy – I think he's just he doesn't like this course. He doesn't like this tournament. I don't see much changing. Obviously, he is rounded back into the form after last year's debacle. But I still just, I'm not going there.
Do you think there will be any residual Louis love after last season?
I'm not trying to impugn a whole country, but Louis, Grace, and Charles, I don't know what to do. Week after week, they played the Zurich and now they've switched a Space Jam situation where Charles is now back in form. Louis got cut. I don't know what to make of him. I think literally the range of outcomes is the entire spectrum. So I will cautiously buy, but I have no idea, honestly.
I'll have no Louis. I probably won't have any Schwartzel. I think if you're going to take one, well, I guess not one, because I will be playing with some Rory Sabatini. But I think that Brennan Grace makes the better play of the big three South Africans this week, Mike.
Yeah, I think probably Grace at his price makes the most sense. I do think from an ownership perspective, this 7K range is flooded. I mean, we're talking about the high 7Ks. When we get into mid-low 7Ks, it's flooded. So, initially, I talked about spread out ownership up top, and meaning like 15 to 20%. But I think you could end up with a bunch of really good golfers sub 10%, just because you do the math on who people are going to own, and you just have to start cutting it. Guys aren't going to be 10% plus owned unless we're just wrong and one or two guys end up mega chalk, but that's just going to bring everybody else down. So I think this is a really good spot that if you have a strong feeling about the player, that you can use that player, not worry too much about the ownership, with maybe like one or two exceptions.
All right, let's rapid fire through the just entire top of the $7,000 range. I want some one-word answers here, and Mike, we'll start with you on this, and then Ben, you follow right up. Play or fade Bubba Watson?
Fade.
Fade.
Alex Noren?
Play.
Yep, buying in again.
Yeah, play for me as well. Matt Kuchar?
Play.
Safe, but yeah, play.
Yeah, I'm going to play him too. Ian Poulter?
Fade.
Fade.
Fade for me as well. Brooks Koepka? Play for me. I like Brooks.
I'm going to roll the dice. Play.
Probably fade for me.
Mark Leishman at basically no ownership.
Flip a coin. Can I say that?
But
I'm not going to make Ben go first.
Well, this is actually what I wanted to talk about, solely because isn't this the sort of player that we look at that everyone's kind of off of? He had the nice Masters and then faded on the weekend. But we know that he appears in these like big tournaments. He has a win at a Pete Dye course at the Travelers. He's won at API in Florida. Like, if we're going to get Leishman at like 2% owned, doesn't he make some sense?
I mean, this is the same spot for me as it was for the Masters. Like, as I was preparing for this show, I was scrolling through and I go, oh my God, no one's going to play Mark Leishman, and it's not that bad of a price. I did the same thing at the Masters and I was like, but I'm not going to play him. And then, of course, he played pretty well and it didn't end as well as he had hoped. But similar spot this week. This is, if I'm playing the 3 max type thing, he's not going to be in my mix. If I'm mass multi-entering, playing 20 plus lineups, he's gonna, crack a few of them, but he's not someone I'm gonna go crazy on.
What do you think, Ben?
I like him. Yeah, he's one of those guys early in the year, we saw him creeping up, where he would have been priced in the mid 8s in a situation like this. And you look at the recent form, he was good. It's been a break at Heritage. He just unraveled off the tee. I throw that out completely. That was just a ridiculous outlier. And he's just the guy who's not going to garner ownership, so you don't need to allocate a ton. With Mike, in the sense, he's not going to be a staple of my main lineups. But if you're running a bunch out there, you can take 10, 12% and probably have possibly like 3x on a 4% ownership, which I think is decently reasonable for a guy like that.
The rest of the guys, Louis, Cam Smith, Daniel Berger, and Billy Horschel. I think that like Jacksonville resident Billy Horschel playing well, won at the Zurich. When you look at his odds compared to his price, he's 55 to 1 this week for whatever reason in this field. People are like really riding the Billy Horschel train. I think I'll top off right now. Berger and Smith are the two that really kind of intrigue me. I don't know if I want to take either. Can you guys make a compelling case for one? I lean more Smith over Berger, though.
I lean Berger, but I'm honestly, all those names you just rattled off, I'm probably not going to own very much. Like, they're not making my top 3 GPP teams.
Ben?
I'm heavily on Berger. I was heavy on him last week. He did nothing. Couldn't putt, but the irons were good. I was encouraged by that. he's a guy that really benefits from being in Florida. He's a Florida guy, likes Bermuda. I think this is a really good pivot off Grillo. Not saying I'm not using him, but Berger is a guy that I'm going to be way overweight on.
All right, the chalk range from the bottom $7,000 area. It starts off with Patrick Cantlay at 75, then Finau, Grillo, Harman, Zach Johnson, 75. Cantlay, Grillo, and Zach Johnson right now I have all projected for double-digit ownership. I've just assumed that Finau is going to draw ownership because he always does. And then you have Brian Harman sitting there. And this is sort of the case that I was talking about with these pivots that, hey, it might not feel comfortable doing some of these things because he's not playing the best, but you look at his Pete Dye track record, it's very good. When you look at courses on Bermuda, he's very good. When you look at courses where driving distance gets taken out of play, it's a lot like Kisner in that sense. Brian Harman can be very good. I'm going to play Brian Harman, almost like the same thing with Noren. I'm not going to look too much at what they've done over the past few tournaments, but just go on the longer sample I've seen of Harman at this style of course, and he's the guy, I think, to get away from all the chalkier options, who I all kind of like. I think everyone kind of likes them. They set up perfectly for this course, but I just know that taking them all is going to just lead to disaster here.
Yeah, you don't want to take all of them because they're all going to carry decent ownership. But as I was saying, there's so many good guys in the 7K range. I don't think it's possible for all of them to be too chalky. And right now we've got Grillo as the main chalk. So mostly I'm just making sure and being conscious that I pivot off of Grillo on main teams, not so much looking for a super low owned guy like Harman, but I'm fine using Finau. I'm fine using Patrick Cantlay, despite him destroying my bankroll at the Masters. I forgive you, Patrick. You'll make up for it for me this week. So I'm focusing on pivoting off Grillo because I think he's gonna be really chalky. But other than that, I think Harman's fine. If I were to break down plays between fade, a 3 max play, and an MME play, Harman would be right in the middle as an MME play, but not someone who would make the 3 max cut for me.
Because, I mean, in terms of, like, sometimes I always weight it against what do I want to do with my DraftKings teams, what do I want to do in the betting market. I bet Grillo to win. I bet Zach Johnson to win. I bet Patrick Cantlay to win. So I think that they have that necessary upside. I think Zach Johnson probably is the best floor of that group, or maybe Grillo does right now with just how well he's been playing and striking the ball. But, Ben, what do you do with these chalky guys? Like, do you have a specific power rankings of the way that you like them? Do we just go with Finau because he's going to be the lesser owned of the chalky guys?
So for me, Grillo is just a guy. I've played him the entire year, and I'm not going to really stop. Even though he's going to be chalky here, what I'm going to try to do is find ways to be different while having him in certain spots. So I just mentioned Berger. Those are the type of guys that I probably try to pivot off of, maybe Zach Johnson, Cantlay. Finau's a guy, yeah, I have no problem with him. He putted awful here. We were talking before the show. Awful here last year. He would have made the cut. Should have made the cut, and I do think he's just kind of a different golfer than we've seen and when you look at longer history with him. But Grillo's a guy it's just hard to ignore. I know chalk at a high variance event is definitely a recipe for disaster, but man, I mean, he's been good and he's firing on all cylinders, going to a course that should set up great for him, and he's been good in the past year.
All right, so there's a lot of names. There's like 40, 50 names in the rest of the $7,000 area. So you can pick and choose of the ones you want. I want to highlight a few, though. Adam Scott, we talk about course history. He's got a good course history here. This was the spot of his breakthrough win in 2004. That's how long Adam Scott's been around. I think everyone's finally off of him because he's been burning people so much recently, although he has made the cut. He made the cut last week. Didn't do much with it, but he did make it. But I went back and looked at his longer-term form because still in ball striking, he rates out really well. And I look back at where are the two places that he really played well this year? Well, let's go look at Adam Scott for a second. Oh, Adam Scott played well at Valspar. He played well at Honda. I mean, courses in Florida where you don't take a lot of drivers off the tee. He's played well here over the years. I'm not giving up on you, Adam Scott. You're going back in the lineup, and I can be devastated when you miss every 2-foot putt. I might even pair you with Luke List and Tony Finau, just so I can have like a max heart attack on Thursday. And I'm like, these guys could have been 12 under, and they shot 3 over somehow. But I just... Enough people are disenfranchised by Adam Scott at this point that I think that you don't need much of him anymore. I don't think he's going to garner a lot of ownership, especially with so much chalk around him, that if you had him at 10%, you're way over the field, I think.
I think he might be a little bit more chalkier than you're getting at, but yeah, I don't think he's going to be over 10%. And I like Adam Scott. As I said, one of the strokes gain metrics between the major 4 that seems to get to not matter as much here, strokes gained putting. Now, Adam Scott can still find a way to screw you with the putter. That's just sort of, a small tiebreaker type of thing, but it helps me feel a little bit better about using him. I'm with you though. I like taking the all putting tilt team, and then I can just tell people that I played really well this week and variance got the best of me. So
it's all about that hedge life.
Are you
in this range? I'm interested to see if anyone owns Ben On, because our initial ownership projections on him.
I like Ben On.
So do I.
He and Ryan Moore are two sneaky guys that when I ran my shorter term model of 24 rounds and 36 rounds on Ryan Moore and I guess not weirdly, but Scott Piercy, who always rates out well because he strikes the ball really well. I don't know if I want a Scott Piercy, of course, with this much water though. Yeah, but on Moore. But are you going to play Adam Scott, Ben?
Might have a little. I've given up long term. I was holding on like most, but it's just not happening. I mean, last week it wasn't the putter, and kind of like the flip side of Tiger, that was more discouraging because he finally putted decent for him. He putted amazing, and he still did nothing. So it's there. The price is good enough where you're basically asking him to make a cut. Should be able to do that. Don't mind sprinkling, but he's not in cash consideration anymore for me, and he's not a guy I'm allocating a ton to.
So who are the other guys between $7,500 and lower, Ben, that you're really giving a look to?
You mentioned Benny. I mean, if you want a course where putting's not important, that's the guy. He's a great ball striker, good with the irons, not going to be popular. And then one who's definitely going to be popular, but for good reason, is Webb. I think everyone, I don't need to explain that. He's just firing on all cylinders, kind of like Grillo in the sense that it's just hard to ignore. Plenty of plays here. So, you got the Hadwin. Jimmy Walker's a guy I look to. But those are more just tournament guys if I want to mix and match. Webb is certainly a guy I'm going to probably have in cash and definitely interested in.
I'm not using any Webb. Webb is going to be a full fade for me. I don't like what he's doing off the tee. I don't like once he gets he's bizarro Webb. That's how he's been playing all year. At one point, he was great with these long irons, with his wedges off the tee, and the ball striking was off the charts. He was great around the green, couldn't putt. Now all of a sudden, he's lights out putting, still good around the greens, can't drive the ball for shit anymore. So if he's going to, I know that he's going to be somewhat popular because he's being talked up. I know that Hadwin is probably going to be around the same ownership. I'd much rather have Hadwin right now.
Man, that's a shocker. Yeah. I didn't see that coming.
I like both Hadwin and Webb, and our projection model agrees. So I'm not really a good tiebreaker here. I will say two guys we didn't talk about yet. One that I know you like a lot, Pat, or we might have referenced a little bit, Luke List, and also Terrell Haddon. Both these guys are guys that might make my 3 max teams.
Well, I mean, if Luke List is going to win, I figured you probably need to have him on your roster, don't you?
That seems like a good strategy, that if you knew ahead of time a guy was going to win, you might play him. Yeah, I could see doing that.
I mentioned this week after week because I'm like the fan, Mr. Luke List when it comes to this sort of stuff. Although betting him to come top 10 every week seems like a far more profitable play. Play him on DraftKings, bet him to come top 10, never bet him to win. That's the guy he's coming to. Although I did bet him to win this week because I do that every week. But just like he's the Paul Casey of the models now. He's the $2,000 less Paul Casey. The guy just can't putt whatsoever. He's awful. But even around the green, he's incredibly good. And when you look at these shorter tracks, and I keep coming back to it, Honda, Valspar, Heritage, one of those is a Pete Dye course. They're hard courses where driver doesn't come into play. Luke List has top 5s at all of them so far this year. So I don't see any reason to jump off now, especially because there's other guys garnering ownership. To not say that he won't be highly owned. He will be among people in this range, but it'll be a lot less than you think.
Yeah, our strokes gain trends tool, his tee to green metrics week in and week out have just been absurd this season. So he's the type of chalk that I'm willing to eat. I'd rather go against Ben here. I'd rather fade Grillo and play List than the other way around.
Wow. I feel, well, good. I hope people do that. I have no problem with List. I think, Pat, you just talked about it. His around the green, he's made real strides, and he's rolling. But now Grillo is my Argentine. He is going to break through before Luke List. Mark my words.
You threw out Jimmy Walker, Ben. I like Jimmy Walker this week as well, and I don't think you're going to need much of him.
No, I don't think so either. He's kind of just he's the only thing people talk about with Jimmy Walker is Lyme's disease. Other than that, you never hear any any really breakdowns of him, good with the irons. He hasn't been doing much. He was in the Texas swing. He was good at Valero, good at the Masters. So the form is there. The ownership won't be. And he has the upside. He's, I think, a perfect tourney play. There's certainly cut risk, but that's, with water, everyone's in the cut risk this week. So you can get a guy at low ownership, and if you get him right, the reward could be massive.
If we look back to last year, Kyle Stanley finished very highly, so did Brendan Steele. Mike, do you have any interest in those two guys?
Honestly, off the bat, I don't. I just think there's too many names of golfers that are just straight up better than them.
Ben?
Kind of the same. I wouldn't fault anyone if they targeted them. I don't think they're bad plays, but you get into a situation where you have too many guys in your player pool pretty fast down here.
How about Kevin Na? Someone with a bunch of top tens at this course and can save himself a lot of bogeys because he's a pretty decent putter, and he's Hadwin, Spieth, Patrick Reed, Luke List somehow, and then Kevin Na, your best around the green players on tour.
I'm gonna Na with Kevin Na. I can see that a bit more than Steele and Stanley, but that would still only be like a fringe MME play. And I just keep coming back. There's so many good names. I think you can find a lot of really good golfers like Webb Simpson, for example, who we talked about. I don't think he's going to end up major chalk. I just don't think the math works out that he's major chalk. So I'd rather take a guy like that at 6 to 8% than a guy like Kevin Na at like 2 to 4%.
Can you pull the trigger on Kevin Na, Ben?
I can. Him and Jimmy Walker are about, I don't think you need to get crazy egregious this week. It's just such a strong field. But those two are guys that I think are going to be minuscule ownership. And they're the guys I'm taking as some flyers down here with Chris Kirk. He's the other one. Definitely going to be more popular. But Kevin Na, even though results have been pretty bad, he burns me all the time like most people. I'm going to buy, though, in this spot.
Yeah, Chris Kirk's the interesting one. When we look at strokes gained total from the past 5 years, I mentioned Rory rated out to be number 1, and he is. Then it's Sergio, Adam Scott, Francesco Molinari, Hideki Matsuyama, and Chris Kirk. It's really bizarre, and he has a great track record at Pete Dye courses. I don't know what it is with him, and you're going to know pretty quickly about Chris Kirk. Let me tell you. He'll be like 5 over through 5, and if he's like 1 under through 5, you're like, oh, it's a Chris Kirk week. Excellent. But is he going to end up being too popular to play in terms of where he is in this range, just way more than everyone else? Or is his ownership being artificially inflated from the projections that we're seeing because industry people and people that play every week and people that write about it tend to kind of like Chris Kirk here as a lean, Mike?
I think it's a situation where he ends up like 8% versus other guys in this field are like 2 to 4% in this range. So it depends what you mean by chalky and like if that bothers you. Like how much leverage are you trying to get? Are you looking for a sub 3% owned play, or are you fine with a single digit play that might be more like 5+%? So I think this week, like if you like a guy, I wouldn't bat an eye because he's not going to be sub 5%, because it's just going to be a real challenge for all these guys that we think will be chalky to be at 10+% because we think about them so much. And you start adding up, when you do ownership projections, right, you got to make it fit. You got to get to 600% total. You got to have the average cost of the salary work out. And you run that math, and there's just not a lot of guys that are going to get to 10+%.
I see. And this is why I bring it up, because like the initial projection that I see has him around like 13%. And I don't think that it's going to get that high. So I think that might be a bad number.
Yeah, I don't think it gets that high. I think you're talking like 6 to 8% range.
All right, well, if that's the case, I was going to play him either way. So at 8%, I like that more. And if I have him in 3 of 20 lineups, then no big deal. It'll be double the field. The last few guys from down here, one was Ollie, who had a really good junior players career at this event. It's his first time here and always plays better in Florida, as we know. Russell Knox and Lucas Glover are down here too. And Satoshi Kodaira, the guy who won me all the money, just won at a Pete Dye course. Should we, he's going to come like sub 1% owned again.
That's all. That's the only benefit I think. I'm not playing.
That's it.
What about the other guys?
Yeah, for me, I don't mind. Ollie probably, if I'm ranking Ollie, Knox, and Glover, but Ollie won. I think the upside is there, and for what I want him to do, is the tournament play strictly. risk reward. I want the upside. I'll take the cut risk, and he certainly has that.
Well, you say that with Ollie though. I think he's made like 7 cuts in a row somehow. It just doesn't seem. It just doesn't seem like it.
Though, like,
what's that?
I feel like those made cut statistics can be pretty random. Where a guy, we used to think of Ollie as a volatile guy who could miss a lot of cuts. Now all of a sudden he's not a volatile guy because he made 7 in a row, and I don't know. I just think there's a lot of noise to that. But he has made cuts. I think he's made cuts at a pretty high clip over the course of his career, though. I don't think we ever thought of Ollie as like a volatile guy.
Really, I always thought of him as a kind of a volatile guy, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. He missed a lot of cuts early on by like 1. I know because David.
Yeah, from experience. The thing with Ollie, I mean, it's true. I'm looking back right now, and he has just kind of middling results. But I do think he's one of the guys who's going to break out. Not saying it's at the Players. I do like the upside. He can get crazy hot with the irons. Glover murdered me last week. I really thought he was a good play, and he just was bad with the putter. Great ball striker. He's the same story every week. Phenomenal ball striker. He can't putt. I usually like him when he's almost the flat min. You're getting a slight bump here. Don't hate it. You could use it. And then Knox. I still remember him. I think it was 2 years ago when he hit in the water like 10 times on 17. That's, he's a resident. That's about the only thing I'll say about him. I'd have no interest.
Bill Haas. You're always Mr. Bill Haas, Ben. I'll be playing some Bill Haas at a Pete Dye course. Why not?
Of course. Everyone should play a little Bill Haas at all times. He's my Molinari to balance out Mike and Molinari. Yeah, I like Bill Haas. He's not playing really great, but he can grind. The harder it is, the better, because he really doesn't have the scoring upside that you'll look for. But you saw at Heritage, he busted through for a top 10, and this sets kind of what he wants to do. So if there's a place to buy him, it's here.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, one guy in this range that doesn't play a lot of events, but our model seemed to always like him when you just adjust what he's doing.
Stricker!
Yep.
Yeah, that's the guy. And it does seem like it makes sense from a course fit perspective where you don't need that distance quite as much. So I will definitely be using some Steve Stricker. I probably am not as high on him as our model, which has him as like a top 10 value on the week. I think he's more of like someone who's probably like 35 to 40th range in terms of golfer skill. We have him more like 25th best. So maybe somewhere in the middle where my gut feel is and where the data seems to spit out where he is, but he's going to come at like almost no ownership. He's one of the guys that I'm more comfortable with in this range.
Yeah, I like Stricker as well, and we saw VJ really do well at this course last year. VJ is like a resident and knows the course exceptionally well, but seniors can get themselves around TPC Sawgrass no problem. So I do like that. Alexander Leve is coming over. He won in Morocco. He won a tournament in Morocco a few weeks ago. So he's like the best player on earth, according to people on Twitter. Do you want any part of Alexandre Lede from France?
No. I just think he's going to be the guy. Every week there's a guy that everybody thinks is a sneaky guy that people may have not heard of, and he's going to somehow bolster himself to like Chris Kirk levels of ownership. And I just have no interest. I know he's trying to get on the Ryder Cup team. It's in France. He's playing good golf, but this is a whole different ball game coming over here. So I will let other people chase that.
Yeah, I'm out on Team France here too. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I'm out.
Good. Screw you, France. I really don't want to see him on the Ryder Cup team. I'm not going to lie to you.
I think he's going to make it. As
someone who, and I know you guys are Team America, I root very hard for the European team. And I just think he hurts their chances.
I mean, they have Rory, so it doesn't matter because he's just the best. So.
But like, if he, I know it's in France, but if you could have the option between taking like Leve, and maybe he plays himself, maybe he wins this week and plays himself onto the team, then there's no question about it. But he's going to get the nod as the captain's pick because it's in France, but he's going to get the nod over like Cabrera Bello and Ian Poulter and guys like this. Like, that's the fringe of the European team. Like, it's ridiculous. All right.
Yeah, that seems wrong.
After Martin Keimer wins the Players, maybe he'll be on the team. He's $6,900. When we talk about players with great, at least making the cut course histories, and he has won this event before as well, it's Sergio, Zach Johnson, Molinari, and Martin Keimer is the other one who just makes the weekend every year. And sometimes he plays really well and comes in first. Other times he's like T53. And he had like bizarro Keimer week last week where all of a sudden he couldn't drive the ball or hit irons, but his normally atrocious around the green game popped up and he was really good. He could putt all of a sudden. I'm going to play Keimer either way just because I play him at this event every single year. Do you think, and it doesn't seem like people are going towards Keimer for the first time in ages because he hasn't been playing well, coming off the wrist injury. Will you guys have any interest in Keimer?
His form has been pretty atrocious. I'm probably not going to play him. I do find it very interesting though. Last year in this event I played the Thunderdome and he was, I think, 45% owned. So it's kind of wild to think that at 6,900 this year, he's likely going to carry sub 5% ownership.
Guys, right in that range, you got Keimer, you have Keegan Bradley, and Austin Cook. Ben, 3 players that I actually like a lot for this event. Do you like those guys at all, or are there other in the $6,000 area? Or do you even need to go down into this area because the pricing's so soft?
So that's what I was going to say. I'm going to try to avoid. I naturally like the balance build. It's one of the benefits is I don't think you have to go down here if you don't want to. If I do, Austin Cook's a guy I never play, but he's just good. He's a grinder. He's making cuts. That's kind of all you really need him to do here. If you do roster him, I like him over someone like Keimer, who's just, it's just not working right now. I think, I was wondering where his form is going to be at, and it's just not clicking. So I'm going to try to avoid, sub 7 as much as I can. I think the talent level does start to get pretty murky down here, and it's a tough sell outside of some leveraged 1%ers.
Well, if you want to take a flyer from down in this range, which I will do because I love taking flyers from down in this range, those 3 guys I think are somewhat safer and a bit intriguing. But if you want some like roll the dices down here, Andrew Landry, who's coming off a win a few weeks ago. I know he withdrew last week, but I just don't think he really cared to be there, to be perfectly honest with you. Coming off a win and then having to play Zurich the week right after. So I like him at $6,800. I think that he's sort of like Kyle Stanley in a way that he can just hit every fairway. He doesn't hit it a ton. Very good at ball striking. Pretty decent around the green. And boom, you can be on your way with Andrew Landry. Rory Sabatini, another guy with pretty decent course history, playing pretty well this season. Plays well at Pete Dye courses. And the other one is the Boz. Dominic Bozzelli played the junior players here, so he is somewhat experienced with the course. Plays well at Valspar, plays well at Career Builder, these shorter courses, and he can get it going around the greens a little bit as well. The only other one I would just throw into the mix is Jonas Blix, because I think that you can dedicate a lineup to him every time you play at a Pete Dye course, because he randomly finds top 10s once every 4 times. I don't know why.
I'm really not on anybody. I'm not very adventurous. I like to get more adventurous with guys that I know are good long-term and everyone's afraid to play. And, the 8, high 7s, even the low 9s range. But I don't get very adventurous when we get into the sub 7Ks, especially when I see such a big discrepancy in like overall skill level when you get past, even when you get past 7,300, it really starts to drop down with the exception of 1 or 2 guys. And then I think when you get past 7K, there's another pretty big tier drop off that I have no interest in using.
Anyone from down here, Ben?
One guy. I agree. Mike's taking the absolute right approach here. You don't want to mess around with the talent cap, but Jonas Blix, only because you said it, when you get him right, he actually can bust through the top 10. He's the one guy that I think, most likely he misses the cut, but I will probably have between 5 and 10%, which is going to be between 5 and 10x in terms of overweight. And I think you just roll the dice there if you're playing a bunch of lineups. But the real move is to just not dip here. You're sacrificing too much in terms of talent.
I know we just skipped over this range. I just kind of noticed it. So I did want to ask you about these last 3 guys at $7,400. Rafa, Chappell, and Grace. I said I like Grace the best of the South Africans. I'll be using little him. I don't want any part of Rafa right now. I think that he's going to be inflated because he made a double eagle on a hole here last year, and it made his result look a lot better than it was. And if he's not putting, and that's the only, at WGC Mexico, he gained 10 strokes putting. And that's really been his only good performance in a really long time. So I'm out on him. And Chappell's an interesting one because he came second here the year that Day did. He was chalky for a bit. He had that injury, which we didn't know was a real injury or not, and then people got off of him. I just don't know if anyone's going to own Kevin Chappell. And when I sort by Pete Dye on FantasyNational.com, he is a name that just kind of pops up near the top. He has a good eye for these die courses.
I think all three of these guys you mentioned are really, really good MME plays. But I struggled to like one so much that I would use on one of, my primary 3 max GPP teams. If it was going to be one, to be Brandon Grace, but to be, full transparency, that's just mostly a feel thing. I just think that he has the most upside here and is probably has slightly discounted price relative to the other two.
I just worry. The thing with Chappell is that can go so horribly wrong if he starts missing greens in regulation, because he's not the best around the greens, but when you get Kevin Chappell right, he hits everything to 20 feet, and you just hope he can make a few. So, Ben, what do you do with this range?
This is a tough range, an interesting one. Chappell is a guy that I'm interested in. Grace is probably my favorite. RCB is definitely out for me, and I'll replace him with Snedeker. Not going to have any ownership. I just, kind of like Mike was saying, it's more of a feel thing. He's just someone that I'm just not used to. I'm not ready to accept him as a $7,400 player, even in a field like this. I think he more should be up there where Bubba is, kind of around, say flat 8K. So I will just buy just in terms of I think he's going to regress more positively. And Chappell's the one guy, though, that I think if you're looking for someone who could really, have the upside, he's the one I want to target. I think he has more risk than Grace. I think Grace, soars through the cut, kind of gives you what you want. But Chappell's the guy, the results have been, bad at the Masters, bad at Heritage. Came back at Valero. You mentioned it with the irons. He can get pretty hot, so I will buy there.
I didn't realize that Snedeker has been playing a little bit better here.
Yeah, it's coming around.
Yeah, 23rd at Heritage, 15th at Valero. Maybe Snedeker is the guy.
Come on in.
I will say, Chesson Hadley almost shapes up a lot like Kevin Chappell here, who's around the same price. If he doesn't hit a green in regulation, he's screwed. He might chip it into the water 3 times. He sucks around the greens.
It's bad.
All right, final thoughts on the Players Championship. I want to talk about overall lineup construction a little bit. And I think you guys have both alluded to it, that you guys are both going with balanced approaches on the whole.
Yeah, I like the balanced approach. And that's, like Ben, I generally like to build that way. And I think that gets amplified when we have the loose pricing, really strong fields, where I think the bottom end of my roster is going to be so much better than the bottom end of another person's roster. I will caveat that when we think of like projected value, like projected DraftKings points per salary, when you're looking at tournaments where you need the winner, sometimes you can focus on that too much. Whereas if, Rory, let's say, is going to be low owned and he's got, you think he's got a 10% chance of winning the entire tournament, like that's still a good play almost regardless of the price. I do want to caveat that because I do think at times we can think about that wrong. But when it's all said and done, give me 6 shots at guys that have a legitimate chance to win this tournament. So I'll be living in, like the 7,300 to mid 9s range this week. And I might make one team that's like really, really mega balanced with my lowest price golfer maybe being in the 7,600 to 8K range.
Well, I think you can get away from chalk if you build a super balanced lineup. And if you do want to ignore the very top guys, and look, we've seen a lot of, at the time, mid-range stars win this event. Yeah, Tiger's won. Yeah, Phil's won. But even when you look at someone like when Adam Scott won or when Stenson won, they weren't top 5 guys in the field the year that they won. They were kind of breakthrough players. So if you want to start your team with John Rahm, let's say, and he's 9,300. So yeah, I project Rahm to be pretty highly owned. I project Stenson to be pretty highly owned. I project Bryson and Tiger to be very highly owned. But I don't think that there's going to be the combination of those 4 guys together a lot. So, Ben, is that a way that you can attack some of these lineups by just saying no to the top $10,000 guys?
Absolutely. You're sacrificing the win equity up there, but this is such a deep field, and the water is such an equalizer. Big names are going to get cut, obviously. So it's not a situation where it's like, well, the winner's probably going to come out of this top 5. And if you don't go there, you're just giving up too much. I don't mind building, starting with the Roses of the world, Ricky's fine, Casey. There's a million guys right below them that when we've seen them be in form, they were in that 10K range. It's kind of a rolling system with DraftKings. There's recent form, there's course history, but I don't think there's that big of a difference. Whereas if you look at towards the bottom, you're talking about Webb, List, say someone like Grillo or Jonas Blitz. I mean, there's such a drop off in some of those sub 7K guys. I absolutely think that balance is the way to go.
Yeah, I can see some balanced lineups doing really well here. I think that's an interesting strategy to take at a lot of these Pete Dye courses. That the best guys, outside of the Travelers, the best guys at the Travelers tend to play pretty well. But all the other ones, like even the Heritage, like if you had just faded the top 4 guys, the above $10,000 guys, that's how you won at the Heritage because none of those guys played well.
Yeah, the course is, you know, the way he sets up, the course is an equalizer, and it doesn't let the guys fully rely on their full scale of talent, a lot of times suppressing the driver like we see here.
Do you think it's advantageous? Like, would you expect, like, let's say you played 20 lineups, and in your normal week you use, I don't know, like 23 players as your player pool. Would you decrease the weightings on players this week and expand your player pool because of the variance of this tournament, Mike?
I think it makes sense to expand your player pool a little bit. And one of the things, I know I was probably repetitive, but talking about a lot of good golfers at single digit ownership, just because it's such a strong field. And I think as a result that adds to it as well. Not just the variance in terms of the amount of guys that are going to miss the cut, but the upside that you can get into your lineup without high ownership, that it makes sense to expand the field. I will say, as balanced as I'm going to go, I'm going to make sure I get some DJ into, you know, one of my primary 3 or 5 lineups.
Okay, so Ben, even on that topic, like if we're like, yeah, I want to go back to playing 20 or 10 or whatever it is there a max number of lineups in terms of percentage that you would own one player in? Because I don't know if I'm going to go above 35, 40% on any one guy. I just don't feel that confidently that that guy is definitely going to make the cut, even if we talk about the top end.
Yeah, this is not the week to do that. You know, there are some weeks, you know, I remember at the Masters, we talked about, you know, it's an easy cut to make. You can kind of slam someone 75% if you want to. This water, again, even if you love a guy, a couple unlucky shots and he's done. So like Grillo is probably my favorite play in terms of a guy I know I'm going to have to leverage. I'm going to have to get a lot of them to get overweight, but I'm still not, you know, I would never consider locking someone in a situation like this because the cut risk is so elevated across the board.
What do you think, Mike? 50% max on anyone?
This conversation really just comes down to your personal risk tolerance. I do think this is a week where you can pick up leverage off like 10 to 15 players where you're gaining, you know, 10 percentage points on the field by having a bunch of guys 20 to 30% rather than going all in on one guy, which seems to be in line with what both you and Ben are saying.
All right, that'll do it on the Pat Mayo Experience Players Championship, all caps. DraftKings picks and preview. Want to let everyone know to become a member at fantasynational.com. Right now, still $7 for a weekly membership for this week only. Goes up to $10 next week, locking that price for yourself as long as you want to keep that weekly membership going forward. Full tools, ownership projections, tournament simulator, lineup generators, everything you need in the biggest stat rolling database and most customizable that you can find on the web. So you want to go do that. Ben, tell everyone again what's going on at FanVice.
Yeah, obviously we got MLB in full swing, NBA's wrapping up, and then with golf, you know, we got the projections up, but we added a couple of custom stats, kind of determine volatility, things of that nature. Then we have two real fun podcasts, one behind the paywall on Wednesday night, where we talk a lot of lineup construction, and then Slack, my favorite thing by far, just being able to chat with everyone, break down the week ahead.
You guys have a Slack going at Daily Roto too, don't you, Mike?
We do, and the golf channel is the most popular channel by far of all of our sports, and it comes with any of the premium packages. If you go to dailyroto.com/premium, we've got weekly, monthly, seasonal golf packages. You can check it out. But Golf Slack, it's great not only to talk strategy ahead of time, but it's a good spot to tilt the weekend, throw in some gifts to describe how it's going. Hopefully they aren't too negative, but we have a lot of stuff going on, you know, similar to what Ben said at Fanboys. We got the Slack, we've got a podcast, we've got projections, and really proud of the projections and finish probabilities that we've put out. So just, you know, give us a try. You got a weekly membership. If you like it, you can upgrade from there.
All right. Thank you guys for being on. Good luck this week. And Mike, this could be your week, and I'll tell you why. Generally, when I have Ben on the show, Ben wins like $200,000. But the last, so how much did you end up winning at the Masters, Ben?
Well, I won the Thunderdome, which was 200,000, but yeah, So we need to keep that going. That's the point.
So that happened to you, and then I had you back on the week after, and I don't think you had a great heritage, but I finally won something. So the momentum translated onto me. So Leone, this is your week, Leone.
It's my turn. We have to give Ben kudos too, because I believe this team that won the Thunderdome was a strategy that he outlined pretty specifically in this podcast.
Yeah, well, you both had the assist because I full disclosure, I worked that out on the show. Like that was really how I attacked it, and it obviously ended up working out. But yeah, no, I hope it's one of our weeks.
If I can win the Thunderdome, that'd be great. Actually, I don't think I'm entering it this week, but there's a lot of big tournaments. There's a $5, there's a $5.55. That's really big.
Yeah, the $5.55 is nice. Some good ones.
All right, you guys are just convincing me to play way more of my bankroll than I probably should. So.
Yeah, here we go. I try to talk myself into not playing a lot at the Players every year because I suck at it. And then I make it one of my highest exposure tournaments, and I look at it and be like, oh, you've entered $700. You've won 0. And I'll just be like, oh yeah, remind myself not to do that again next year, and then I'll do it again next year because I'm an idiot like that.
It's so fun though. I mean, whenever you get the loaded fields and you get the big prize pools, it's tempting to, step out of your comfort zone a little bit. Not that I'm advising anyone do that, but I'm sure by the end of the week, what I've entered will be vastly different than my disciplined plan that I outlined on Monday.
Well, maybe you guys can advise me on this because I'm not used to having a bunch of money in my DraftKings account, and then all of a sudden I got a bunch of money, like a lot of money. I can play any tournament I want, the most expensive one. I can max out any tournament. So the first thing I did was take a whole bunch of money off right away. How do you guys do that? I know you guys carry like a pretty decent balance on week to week. How do you prevent yourself from just playing it all?
Well, I generally have like a percentage of my bankroll I'm going to play each week, and I just try and not, sometimes I'll stray up, a week like this a little bit, but you've got to be pretty disciplined because you don't want your money to go. I will say if I ever have a big win like Ben did or like Pat did, the number one thing would
hold on a second. What do you mean if you ever do? You came second in the Millionaire Maker at the Masters.
Okay, when I've had a big win like you guys did, number one, take off some money off the top, pocket that profit. I think that's really important. But I think what that allows you to do too is, and a lot of people won't say to do this, but I honestly think it's a good spot to take some chances and maybe play some tournaments you normally wouldn't, and see if you can really exponentially build your bankroll. That's one of the allures of daily fantasy. And I don't think that you should go in expecting to make a ton of money doing it. But if you happen to bank a tournament, see if you can roll that over. But what allows you to have that mentality, I think, is withdrawing and pocketing a decent chunk of the profit right off the top.
I'll tell you what you don't do. This happened to me the first week after, even though I had no feel for what was going on at Valero. Wednesday night, went out for a beer with a friend, and then I'm like outside having a cig, open up the app, and be like, oh, there's a tournament I can enter. Oh, there's a tournament I can enter. Like, oh, my money's not running out. This is great. So, Ben, I would recommend that you would say, don't do that.
So yeah, I don't do that. But I will second, kind of what I think one of the biggest problems, and I run into this a lot of time in fan advice, is someone will say they want to, take a shot in a tournament that they don't normally play, maybe a higher entry dollar, but they're so nervous about making a good team that they're not willing to lose the money. And if you go in like that, you're in big trouble. So what I advise is, don't do it the next week, but if you have a nice win, take some money out and then just make like what you won was minus that entry fee and play it aggressively. Build how you're building. You just won something. So obviously you're clicking, you're seeing it correctly. But if you go in kind of hesitating, kind of like, oh God, this is a risk, it usually doesn't work out. So I always advise wait until you do have a nice score, take some of that profit, and then you can kind of play free. And if you run it up, then you can really make a mark.
Sometimes I'll play the Thunderdome every once in a while. Very high stakes tournament. I can't play it consistently. And once in a while, I'll find myself making a team where I'm like, oh, this is a really good leverage team. And then I start thinking, oh, but these guys are such good values and I could min cash if I just played these guys. And that's when you hit the withdraw button, to speak to what Ben's saying. If you start thinking in circles like that, just hit the withdraw entry because you're probably playing a tournament you shouldn't be playing if you're feeling that way.
All right, so don't go outside your comfort zone, I think, is the way that we can wrap this up. If someone, ends up winning big money, like my main man Luke Siegel from last week won the $4 viewer of the show. So, hi Luke, congratulations once again. Don't spend all your money on kitchen renovations. Spend it on something fun, like maybe more tournaments or go to Vegas or something. Member at fantasygolfinsider.com. Jeff, Zach, and the team do a great job over there. So, great to talk from around the industry. You can follow me on Twitter at the PME. Same on Facebook, same on Instagram. You can watch yesterday's show. That's up on the YouTube page right now and the podcast feed. And tomorrow, Wednesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, live players chat for any questions that you may have. If you think that Mike, Ben, and I just picked everyone in the field, you're not wrong. Because we don't want to seem like we're wrong. We can narrow it down tomorrow once we got some more information. The three of us will all do that on our specific sites. And my cheat sheet will be up on dkplaybook.com. So if you just check that out, you can see who I really like. And they make the column. All right, I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you for watching. Good luck at the Players Championship. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!